Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, J.R. Stewart.
And good evening, everyone. I'm your co-host, Tommy Duncan.
And tonight we have another fascinating show for everyone. I want to say thank you for joining us. Thank you for subscribing, for liking us, and sharing the information. And if you haven't done any of those three, please do all three of them today, right now, at this moment. And if you click the notification bell, then you'll be notified every time we upload a new show, which is every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. So, Tom, what do we have up as our person of interest for today?
Richard Allen.
We're doing Richard Allen.
Richard Allen, the founder of the first
AME Church.
Independent Black denomination in America.
The AME Church.
Yes, sir.
Now, it's curious that there were some other religious groups at the time. I believe he started the church in the 1700s, 1790s, somewhere thereabout. I can look the year up, but you know, of all the denominations kind of followed it, he kind of followed the Methodists here.
Absolutely. When Richard Allen was very young, and of course he was born into slavery. He was born in 1760, but was born into slavery, and he and his family were split up at a very young age, where his mother and some of his siblings were sold off. But at that time, being in Philadelphia, under the domain of the church, that the enslaved Africans were allowed to actually attend worship at during that time. It was under the umbrella of the Methodist Church. But over a period of time, as he grew up and matured and learned a little bit more about religion and self-taught himself how to read and write, and became one of the most powerful men during that period of time.
So how does a slave get out of slavery and raise enough capital to start a church?
Well, I don't know that he just automatically raised that much money, but obviously it took a very long period of time for him to build a strong enough base of followers and support. And for a period of time, Jimmy, he was under the domain of the Methodist Church, and so he got some support from some of the white ministers. But at the end of the day, with that support came some restrictions. And so he and Absalom Jones, who was another powerful man during that period of time, ended up breaking off eventually and starting their own church and starting their own denomination. But it wasn't without its challenges, just as everything else that we've attempted to build in America.
Okay. So, what about family, marriage?
He was married. I know he had at least 5 or 6 children, but from what we know, he was married to one woman during that period of time and had 5 or 6 children. And
I think her name was Flora.
What's that?
I believe her name was Flora.
Yeah.
His first wife. Okay.
Absolutely. So back during that period of time, and it's something, Jimmy, that kind of is interesting during that period of time, and I guess in certain cultures today, in a lot of cases, your family was your wealth, and a lot of people don't really look at it from that perspective today.
Right.
But your family was your wealth.
Well, I guess that is a unique way of looking at it. I'm not sure that that sentiment is shared today. I'm not sure if people really look at their family as their wealth. Sometimes family can be a cost center, can
Right.
be a financial burden to you. I think some people look at it that way. Certainly, if you don't have enough money to cover their needs and yours all the time.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Jimmy, his life and his family life at a very young age was the status quo in terms of black folks in America during that period of time, because even though you could get married and have children, you obviously didn't have domain over your own family. Your slave.
Oh no, that is true. You're a slave master.
Break up, split your family, sell father, mother, children independently or in groups during that period of time. And so at the end of the day, I don't think that people can really appreciate the value of family, especially coming from a country and a culture during that period of time that ripped apart our family structure in America. And, to a certain degree, we still deal with some of the consequences of what happened during that time today. But at the end of the day, family is the most vital part of your identity, your culture, and your future. We don't want to get too far off topic here, but
right. I believe I read that he was that his owner sold his mother and maybe one or two of his brothers. So at an early age, basically he was almost familyless. He was without family at that time. Having at a very young age. So you're right. I think today we take family for granted. Back then I would imagine that as a slave, in those situations, family was all you really had. As far as people that you could trust and count on, and there wasn't a great deal that you could do because you had no control over your life, whether you stayed on this plantation or would be sold off to another plantation. I believe I read that the slave master was in some kind of financial trouble and needed the money, so he began selling off some of his quote-unquote, air quote, stock.
Correct. Absolutely. And again, our ancestors at that period in our history were considered to be property. Or,
yes, they were.
Pretty much like livestock.
They were livestock.
After his mother was sold off, he and his brother and his sister started attending church services in the Methodist Society, which welcomed free blacks and slaves to their church services during that period of time. And so he grew up in under the domain of the Methodist Church, and over a period of time, he started working, doing extra work to earn money, and bought his freedom in 1780 and changed his name to Richard Allen.
Now, I figured that he must have had some kind of connection to the Methodist Church, hence the name, the AMEs. So I figured there was some kind of connection there. So I wasn't totally sure what that connection was. So he attended a Methodist church, a Methodist Episcopal Church, and sort of grew up in their ways. So it's interesting. I'm not that versed between the AMEs and the CMEs and the various Methodist variances today. What is the difference, do you know, between the AMEs and the CMEs? Are the AMEs still around today? Are they still functional?
Well, the African American, the African Methodist Episcopal Church has a very strong foundation. It was founded in the Northeast in Pennsylvania in the latter part of the 18th century, of course, by Richard Allen and Alfred Jones. But during that period of time, what ended up happening, Jimmy, is he attended this conference, a Methodist conference, kind of in his late teens, and ended up kind of sitting back and observing. Of course, they couldn't participate or vote or anything like that, even after having attended services. But they sat back and they observed what was going on in the Methodist Church during that period of time that was controlled by white folks. And they used what they learned as a foundation for what they did in establishing the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And primarily, Jimmy, again, just like in other cases, they got fed up with all the restrictions. He ended up being ordained as a minister in the Methodist Church, but they only let him, for instance, in a church do the 5 a.m. services. But the folks during that period of time, they attended those 5 a.m. services. 5 a.m.
People were getting up and going to church at 5 a.m.
Yes, sir. People complain about 8 a.m. or 11 a.m. now. 5 a.m. And you have to remember, Jimmy, that this was in the late 1700s. Emancipation wasn't until 1865, and so it wasn't as if they had nothing to do and they had weekends off. But bottom line is, they ended up attending, some of the white Methodist churches. Of course, they put restrictions on them. They had, white folks who were making sure that they weren't preaching anything that would incite the slaves to desire or embrace freedom or revolt or anything like that.
Of course not.
Eventually, of course, they ended up separating and creating their own church.
Yeah, we already know what happened to Vesey for preaching independence and rising up, that would get you killed at that time. I believe I read that he had somehow managed to, once he started his church, I guess pull blacks away from the Methodist Church, the Methodist, and maybe there was some bitterness over that some of the congregation has shifted to his church from the church they were previously supporting.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, with the message being crafted, towards, his people, black people, as opposed to the traditional Methodist Church, which was run by white people, for white people. Obviously, it attracted a stronger audience, of slaves and free blacks during that period of time. And, eventually he was able to build up a strong enough congregation, even with the small meager earnings that they had, to build a foundation for a church. And over a period of time, they were able to consolidate what they were doing with the churches, not just in Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, where he was at, but another church in Pennsylvania, I believe, New Jersey and Maryland, and they were able to consolidate those churches into an entire denomination.
Well, and in Delaware, I believe, was another one. Well, like I said, I don't keep up with a lot of churches, so I'm not sure. But are the AMEs still around today? Do you know?
Oh, absolutely. There are AME churches now. I would say this: they are more predominant in the Northeast.
Okay.
Which is where they were founded, and the larger AME churches that you will find are typically going to be in the North and Northeast, which is the foundation of the AME church. But there are AME churches across the country.
Well, man, let's look at this whole process. Here's a person born into slavery who finds a way to work on the side, earn enough money to buy his freedom, educate himself, I guess become active in the church where he learned, I guess, scripture, Bible, learned how to be a minister, was ordained in the church, went on to start his own church and then grow it.
Absolutely.
So with those type of odds and conditions, and really, you talking about some systemic racism that existed at that time, that doesn't even, what he went through wouldn't compare to what we deal with today. I still say that our people complain so much and have so little to overcome versus our ancestors who had so much to overcome and complained so little. And, there was no benefit in complaining when you had work to do. And all they knew was just how to go about reaching their goals, fighting for what was important to them, and getting to the finish line. Not complaining, whining, and crying as they got on the path to reaching their destination.
Well, Jimmy, unfortunately for our ancestors back then, there weren't too many other options, in terms of complaints. Obviously, you had, some free Africans and some enslaved Africans, but unfortunately, during that period of time in our history, they had very few options in terms of what they could do. What I found very interesting about this, Jimmy, is I read a little bit more about, what the African Methodist Episcopal Church, did.
Okay.
Is that, and, again, this is for the Emancipation Proclamation. This is before the freedom of slaves. They actually built the foundation for one of the first Negro conventions in 1830 in Philadelphia, using the Bethel AME Church, which is the church that Richard Allen ran. And I think it was a consortium of leaders from 7 states that came together in 1830 for what they called they called it at that time Negro Convention. That was what we were called. That's right. What the white folks called black folks as Negroes. But it was one of the first large-scale black conventions to address regional and national issues. And the AME Church allowed the folks who convened to use their facilities, for this convention. And so can you imagine, now we talk about not having any facilities or any hotels for thousands and thousands of conventions, that we do through our national organizations and fraternities and sororities and churches and stuff like that. But they use their church as the conference place for their convention, and therefore supporting the infrastructure there for that church.
Now, I did read something. I think I remember hearing about the Negro Convention in 1830. So I didn't realize it was held at this church. But I can only imagine the audacity of the folks to even think they could organize and bring something like that together during this environment. You know, we're talking about the height of racism and slavery. You know, this is 1830. You know, slavery didn't end for another 35 years after that. So you're at the height of slavery at this time, and these people are putting together conventions to talk about what they can do to aid in the freedom and abolition of slavery.
And the other thing that I found that was pretty interesting, one of the things that they addressed, or one of the primary things that they discussed during that convention, was, of course, the riots. There were riots in Cincinnati. In
26 and 29, I believe.
Exactly, 1826 and 1829, where the good white American people attacked blacks who had built, businesses and communities. Because, of course, just like we think Rosewood, just like we look at Tulsa,
just like Black Wall Street, yes.
And again,
that's the MO, Tom.
You talk about, you know what, y'all need to stop complaining and, lift yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, whether it's now or whether it's then, you have communities of black folks who put their nickels and dimes together, building their own communities, building their own businesses, just for people who feel threatened or jealous to destroy communities that we built from the ground up. And again, we talk about folks saying, pick yourself up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But again, the American government doesn't support during that period of time, and to a certain degree today, if we look at policy, if we look at access to capital, it hasn't changed that dramatically from that period of time to now. If we look at what happened then, if we look at what happened in the Tulsa race riots, if we look what happened in Rosewood in Florida, again, we have a very loose infrastructure. We have a different day and time today, but we have a very loose infrastructure.
Well, Tom, that hasn't changed. It is not going to change. The only difference now is that our own people are the ones with the kerosene and the matches burning stuff down, but still the government entities, be it Seattle, where the mayor is ordered the police to back off and just let the people have their way, or New York or Philadelphia or even Atlanta, where I believe they have some space there where they're surrounded the Wendy's that they've burned down. I mean, so it's still the same. Is that the only difference now is that they give you the matches to go burn your own neighborhood down, and our people don't have the good sense to realize that this is not the way that you take your anger out on the system, by destroying your own.
Let me ask you this. All things being considered, we know the history of Rosewood. We know the history of the Tulsa race riots. We know that, dating back to the early 1800s, whenever our communities have built their own infrastructure, built their own communities, built their own businesses, unfortunately, mobs of white people have always destroyed what we built. The question is, if we don't have protection from the federal or the state or the local government, when we do build our own communities and protecting them, and we're not being protected from the government, which, by the way, we pay our taxes to as well, the question is, if we don't have a right to protect and defend our own, where do you go from here?
Well, Tom, one way is to integrate and hide into a greater society where they have coverage and protection. So you would find a way to work your way into middle class or mainstream white society and put your business there. So if something were to happen, your property would be protected. But you're right. If you set up shop in the black community and something happens, there's a very good chance that your property may get destroyed. Your investment that you may have saved all your life for is going to be gone. And then when the banks look at the history of that area and see that you have a history of people burning things down, that doesn't lend well for folks to put money there. So the problem just feeds on itself. So the answer is that, and this is what I believe, is that people in their communities have to invest in those communities. Scrape up your dollars, your change, your cigarette money, your weed money, your Remy Black money, whatever it is, your club money every now and then, and build it yourself. And that if you do that, you'll be less likely to put a match to it when there's a cop killing or something socially is wrong.
I would agree, because I would say this. Historically, when we built our own communities, when we built our own businesses, it wasn't black folks who destroyed our businesses and our capital. It was white folks who destroyed our communities and our businesses when they did prosper.
That was our past history. That's correct.
Now, question being this. We understand that the politics in our country, and especially in our cities or rural areas with a significant or majority black population, the politics through gerrymandering, through other mechanisms, still show that in a lot of cases you have white folks who still control those communities through politics, through access to capital. And so the question is, we have to figure out a design to say, look, for lack of a better term, there has to be a better model for building our communities without being blamed for not being able to build what's been destroyed over and over and over again over the centuries. If we don't have the opportunity to build our own communities, protect our own communities, everybody has a right to bear arms. Now, when black folks bear arms, unfortunately, we're called terrorists. When white folks bear arms, they have a right to protect their communities.
Well, Tom, that's because they trust themselves. They don't trust you or me with a weapon. So that's just a matter of comfort. But once again, it does come back to the same thing. If we can build mega churches, right here in the DFW area, we have multi-million-dollar churches. And this is not to embarrass any of them. The Potter's House and Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship and Antioch and all the rest of them. If we can come together and scrape up millions of dollars, Friendship West, to build these mega structures, we can scrape up some millions of dollars to build a mall or to build a shopping center or a chain of grocery stores to feed ourselves. It just seems like we want to beg for what we need and pay for what we want. And that has to change. I'm not saying take money away from the mega churches. They have their place. But if you can spend $40, $50 million plus on these structures, you can spend $40, $50 million in economic development to build your area up, to put in some fast food chains, some grocery stores, some clothing stores. You can do a lot more for yourself than sit around whining, crying, and complaining. And so when we talk about our ancestors, I'm always impressed by the things that our ancestors did to overcome. And I'm especially impressed with the Greenwood area outside of Tulsa with the things they did, because they were not crying people. When Tulsa stopped delivering bus service to the area, they got together and started their own bus service. I can only imagine today, right now, if Dart said, we're not going to have buses in the black area, what black folks would do, how much instruction of tearing up your own area would result from that, rather than someone saying, we don't need DART. We'll start our own bus service to drive into the black areas. When people needed jobs, you could always find a restaurant owner or a banker or a shop owner, someone to give you a job if you were willing to work. And this is what we have to get back to, employing our own people. We can't continue to look for other people to provide jobs for us and then whine and cry when they don't treat us fairly in those hiring practices. Well, you don't hire your own people, so why do you want me to hire them? You can't ask other people to do what you're not willing to do yourself. So until black folks put their own money into their own reconstruction, and this is the one time, this is the only time in history that I've ever, I'm going to go on record for saying that I agree with anything that came out of the mouth of Jesse Jackson. But when he proposed taking money that blacks have in their 401ks, trillions of dollars, taking some of that money to rebuild black America, that's a plan I can go with. And if we can collectively get black people to go along with that plan, to give up some of your wealth to rebuild the black inner city, then I would say let's do it and roll our sleeves up and get to work. And then that way we don't have to cry about what other people are not doing for us. We can stand up and be proud of the fact that we did something for ourselves. And that is wealth that you can pass on to the next generation for them to expand on.
I would agree with you on that, Jimmy. I think that, one of the most significant things about the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and when we look at the black church in general, at a foundation level, whether we're talking about pre-slavery or post-Reconstruction, the black church at a foundation level had an agenda that addressed the suffrage of black folks in America.
Yes, they did.
It addressed the economic needs.
Yes.
It advocated for the political agenda for black people in America. And one of the things that I find very disappointing is that we allow politicians to come in our church, but unfortunately, I think they tap dance too much on having a political agenda. And when I say a political agenda, I don't really mean a Republican or Democratic advocacy agenda, but what is it you should be demanding from your local government, regardless of whether it is run by the Democratic or the Republican Party? Because at the end of the day, you're going to have both. But as a group of people who are dealing with the same issues nationwide, regardless of whether you're in California or New York, we have to have an agenda that transcends party lines to determine what we need to build our communities. Because what we have are neighborhoods. Generally speaking, Jimmy, when we have predominantly black neighborhoods, as you know, and we've discussed so many times, all the businesses are owned by Caucasians.
Yes, or Asians, Indians.
Asians,
yes,
and other folks. And the reality of it is, the black church is really the only economically viable institution that we can leverage today that has the wherewithal to drive a political agenda, an economic agenda. We start talking about banking, access to capital, a healthcare agenda. Probably the most pivotal issue that we have right now is the state of health in the black community. The housing agenda in America. I mean, your home and real estate is the foundation of wealth in America. Always has been, until something very dramatic changes, will always be for the average American family. And then, of course, we'll have to add, quite frankly and unfortunately, an agenda that deals with the defense of our communities and our households. Because every time, historically, we built strong, viable communities in America, they've been bombed. They've been destroyed.
Well, Tom, where's Richard Allen today? I mean, where is Richard Allen today?
The closest thing I see to a Richard Allen is probably a Louis Farrakhan in terms of his comprehensive approach to the black community and a broad sweeping agenda. Now, that's probably the closest that we come that is nationwide and comprehensive in terms of this messaging and in terms of their goals. I can't find anyone who is probably a very close second. Now, obviously, they have a religious agenda, and of course, everybody is not a Muslim, just like everybody is not a Christian, and you have folks who are atheists. You have to have an agenda that can address or that transcends your religious affiliation and transcends your political affiliation if we're going to address the needs of the broader black community.
Well, Tom, it used to be a time when you could turn to the church for help. when the churches had some political connection with the leadership of your city, so they could offer some help and assistance.
They still do. Do.
I just don't know if the churches are about anything other than the churches today. And making money and expanding their church and paying the preachers. I mean, that seems to be their top agenda. Everything else falls by the wayside. I'm not sure if people turn to the churches anymore during their times of need, and if the church will be there to help them during their time of need. When we had the incident a few years ago in Dallas with the rioting here, and then the police who was shot, where were the preachers then? I mean, where was all the big name preachers we have here in the Dallas area coming together and leading a peaceful protest? Or were they sitting in the back on the sideline somewhere nice and safe in their multi-million-dollar homes saying, boy, look at what's going on in those streets. I'm glad I'm not out there.
Well, Jimmy, I think that there are some ministers in some churches that do a better job than others. I can't disagree with you in terms of the untapped potential of an alliance of the ministers of our churches, whether we're talking about within a location. I mean, if we just talk about DFW, when you look at the potential impact of just the churches in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, regardless of whether it's a small 50 congregation church or you're talking about the Potter's House, which is probably the creme de la creme in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But if you look at a ministerial alliance that doesn't overwhelm smaller churches because they have smaller congregations, but yet at the same time can leverage the resources of the larger churches. But if you just decide we're gonna, they ask for 10% of your gross or net income, depending on who you're talking to. Why can't they take 10% of that and build a bank in the DFW area? We haven't had a bank in the DFW area since Sunbelt, right? At the end of the day, your banking systems are the foundation of business in your locale or in the country. And if they can take 10% of what they're taking in to build the foundation for a bank or a banking system just in this area, the impact that would have within the next decade or so would be cataclysmic.
Well, Tom, this is why I don't give 10% to church. I do make a contribution, but it's definitely not 10% of my income. And here's the reason why, because I feel they're not doing anything of quality with the money. Now, the preacher will be quick to remind me that that's not my concern, that if the church misuses the money, then the sin is on the church leadership, not on me. I don't see it that way, but I remember when my family and I moved back here to Dallas. I was in the military. We moved back here in 1990. And I had read an article at that time in the other, was it Dallas Examiner? It was the second newspaper that went out of business here. But someone had wrote an article how the big churches here in Dallas wanted to start a bank. And they needed $5 million seed money. That's the amount of money you have to start a federal charter, to get a federal charter to start a bank. Tom, at a time when the article said the black banks were depositing $25 million a week in white banks, and somehow they couldn't come together and generate $5 million. So you saying that 10%, that would have been $2.5 million a week. They could have had the seed money in 2 weeks. And that was back in 1990, so I can only imagine what those deposits look like today, going into white banks that do not lend to your people, and yet, you complain about it, we cry about it, but yet, once again, some of the biggest and most successful institutions in the black area are sucking money out of the black community and putting it in white banks. How do we expect anything to ever get better when we're constantly losing? We're always slipping behind the 8 ball. We don't never get a just straight in shot. Huh?
It sounds like an opportunity to me, and I know that ministers don't want their congregation to talk about common sense and economics. They only want to talk about, of course, being able to get access to heaven and eternal life. But at the end of the day, this is common sense stuff. And Jimmy, to your point, this is what the church was about during that period of time. And there are some churches who are doing good work out there.
Smaller churches.
But when you consider the gaping holes that we have and the issues that we have to address, we have to have a call to action, and we have to demand more, not just of our politicians who tax us, but we also have to demand more of our ministers who tax us for the services that we need so that we can build strong, viable communities. And when we build those strong, viable communities, we're able to contribute even more to those institutions, whether we're talking about your local, your state, and your federal government, or you're talking to your churches, because at the end of the day, the more you have, the more you can contribute. That's the one thing that I've, with the exception of institutional racism in America, that always gets me. The black community in America is the most undertapped talent base in America. We have the most creativity. Every other group knows that. But at the end of the day, if you're able to create a rising tide in the black community across America, when you look at the impact that that has on America economically, that's like a no-brainer.
Well, Tom, and that's part of the reason that there are groups of people with concerted efforts to keep black people down for that very reason. We live in a country where opportunity is afforded, but resources are scarce. There's not enough money for everyone to be a millionaire in America.
I don't know that I agree. I think I understand what you're saying in principle, but with the foundation of a country built on capitalism, that is completely anti-ethical to capitalism.
Well, Tom, that may be true, but the reality is that there is no easy path to success in America. It does require hard work, a little luck.
I agree. I agree.
So we have to roll our sleeves up and do what we have to do and stop worrying about the political parties. Now, I tend to be very political focused, only because I do believe there is some opportunity to relieve our suffering through politics. Too much about local politics is out of our control, and it shouldn't be, because we're the predominant force in a lot of these areas, and we don't control it. Then we don't control the economies in our area. Well, the streets are terrible. The services are bad. Crime is high. There are just too many's for us to overcome. And so the easy answer is to just escape. When you get a chance, just move out to the suburbs. Just get away from the city when you get an opportunity. And that doesn't help the situation either. So you're right. We have to have a national call to order to come, hey, let's come together and let's us fix this. We can't rely on Asians, white people, Indians, or anyone else to come into the black community and fix the problems in the black community. And a lot of that we've talked about here that deals with...
If they were going to fix our problem, they would have been fixed a long time.
If they were going to... Well, on top of that, even let's say if they could fix them, there's not a reason for them to. There's nothing in it for them to fix it.
Enough.
So we need to... If you don't make your bed when you get out of bed in the morning, if you don't make your bed up, when you come home, your bed is still messy because you didn't make it up. And so that's where we find things today, and we just can't keep running and escaping our people in our areas. At some point, we have to go back and make an investment. Whether you live there or not, that's another thing, but economically, we need to go back and make an investment. But on top of that, Tom, I'll be very concerned the way conditions are today about doing that, because I'll be concerned that my business may get burned down the next time there's a protest. Quote-unquote peaceful protest, when people are carrying matches and kerosene as a response to what's going on.
Well, the good thing for you, Jimmy, is that with your business, a lot of it, isn't like you have a brick and mortar retail location. Since you're in the technology business, it's a little bit more difficult to get.
Well, that is true. I would say that is true, but I do advocate, and I'm gonna make this challenge again today on the show, that we do come together, form investment clubs, not to invest in Wall Street. There are plenty of black investment clubs that do that. We need to form some investment clubs to invest in the black street. If we don't put money into the black community, we can't expect other people to do it. So let's us come together and make the first step and teach younger generations how to do this. to rebuild your own from within and stop looking from without for help and support. If people want to help, great. Like, for example, I have a printing press back here, Tom. I can start printing off certificates to get you into heaven for $100 if anyone wants to. And all the proceeds would go to investing in the black community to rebuild it. 100% of it. And this will be a pass into heaven if you want.
Pretty good idea, man.
You can not to bypass the church, but if you don't go to church that frequently, this is the way you can still get into heaven and not have to worry about it. $100 is a bargain price to get into heaven. So with that being said, Tom, we're coming up on the end here. Do you have any last words for our listening audience?
This country was built on the foundation of the principle of no taxation without representation. And if we understand our history, we understand that we also have an opportunity here, whether we talk about this politically or whether we talk about this religiously. We've got to leverage our resources for our own benefit. We have to understand the value of our identity collectively and use that to build the foundation for our own future. Because at the end of the day, we all have a lifetime here, but it's what we're doing now that's going to benefit our children's children that matters. You know this, Jimmy.
Right.
After World War II, Japan had nothing. They were destroyed.
Nothing.
Now they are
an economic power
the
now.
Most powerful country in the world. We have to look at that 100-year plan, that 500-year plan, and begin to act accordingly and conduct ourselves accordingly so that we will have a future and our children's children will have a future worth fighting for.
Well, you're right, Tom. Japan had a multi-generation plan to rebuild, and what they could not do militarily, they were able to do economically. There is no reason that can't be Black America today. It's an insult when Google and Apple and IBM and other large tech companies are saying that they have to import talent on H-1B visas to find for programmers and engineers, when I know Black programmers and engineers who are out of work, who are doing other things besides what they went to school for. So they are totally overlooking Black talent and importing it for whatever reasons they're doing it. So let's not fool ourselves, people. America still has some problems, and the Black people, especially the Black man, is at the bottom of the totem pole. So I'm urging my brothers and sisters to come together and let's use our resources. I believe the projection was about $1.8 trillion in spending power this year, but because of the virus, that may go down a few $100 million, who knows? We'll see at the end of the year where the numbers come in at. But still, we're still talking over $1 trillion floating through our hand, and we need to find a way to make that $1 trillion circulate through the Black community multiple times so we can turn $1 into $8 of economic activity. At that point, we'll be truly free. Other communities do it, and I'm not talking about 8 is a conservative number. The Asian community here in the DFW area, I read their money floats in their neighborhood 30 times, Tom, before $1 leaves. I mean, for every $1 that comes in, they get $30 of economic activity, and before any $1 even leaves. So 8 should be something that we should be able to achieve. Right now, our money turns over with each other less than once.
Right. The solution, at the end of the day, Jimmy, the solution to the problem, to your problem, to our problem, is right in the mirror.
Yes. So we call it as we see it here, guys. We don't hold any punches. We are equal opportunity insulters. So I don't want people to think that we're just going after Black people, and that's not the case. It's just the Black community is where our concern is the highest. So I just assume that white people are, for the most part, are okay. The Indians and Asians are okay. And then whatever problems they have, that they are coming together and dealing with them. But our problems are supreme because they are just so much larger than everyone else's. And so we're just calling attention to our own issues with solutions. This is not to pick on Black people. We're trying to do our best to raise a consciousness so we can start solving our own problems. With that being said, Tom, I'm going to give you the last word to say goodbye, and then we're going to close it out.
We want to thank everyone for listening to us today. We want to thank you for having conversations among your family, your friends, and your community on the things that we're talking about, the things that we need, and the solutions that we're trying to solve. And remember, folks, at the end of the day, the solution to your problem is in the mirror. Think about it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week, guys.